The rain hadn't been in the forecast, nor had the sudden ache that bloomed in Amara's chest the moment she looked up and saw him. The coffee shop on Fifth was packed that afternoon, typical for a Wednesday, when the clouds threatened to spill and the city's heartbeat slowed to a thoughtful hum. Amara had her sketchbook open in front of her, a half-sipped latte by her elbow, and the ghost of a dream she couldn't quite sketch lingering in her mind. She was only half aware of the bell chiming above the entrance, signaling someone had come in. It wasn't until she heard a voice smooth, unmistakably familiar, that her pen stopped mid-stroke. "Do you always sit alone and look like you're unraveling a universe?" he asked. Amara looked up slowly. He hadn't changed. A little older, maybe, sharper around the jawline, and his hair was longer than before. But those eyes, gray like stormy skies, just before they broke, still held that mix of mischief and melancholy that once turned her world upside down. "Liam," she whispered, his name falling from her lips like a memory she hadn't meant to speak aloud. He gave a soft chuckle and tucked his hands into his coat pockets, standing a safe distance from her table like he wasn't sure if he was welcome. "Didn't think I'd run into you here, or at all, honestly." She blinked, unsure whether the warmth in her chest was relief or the beginnings of an old wound reopening. "What are you doing in New Haven? Job interview?" "The universe must be in a playful mood today." He nodded toward the chair across from her. "Can I sit?" It should have been a no. After all these years, after the silence, after the breaking, but somehow the words refused to form. She gestured to the seat instead. He pulled it out, careful, cautious, as if her presence required reverence. "I always wondered if you stayed here," he said, eyes scanning her sketchbook. "Didn't expect you to be still sketching, though." "I never stopped," she replied, closing the sketchbook gently. "You just stopped watching?" That made him pause. Their history wasn't made of grand gestures or loud arguments. It was built in silences, some too comfortable, some too long. Years ago, they'd been inseparable. Young and reckless, Amara the quiet soul with paint on her jeans, and Liam the wild heart who saw poetry in everything except permanence. And then he left. No real reason. No proper goodbye. Just a flight, a distance, and silence. I deserved. "That," he murmured, not meeting her gaze. Amara didn't respond. The hurt had long been buried, but it had never really died. Seeing him now, in this familiar place where her life had continued without him, made her wonder if closure was ever real or just a story people told themselves to sleep better. "I never meant to hurt you," he said after a beat. "I was scared of how much you meant, of messing it up. So I left before I could." She finally met his eyes. "You still messed it up?" He nodded, shame flickering across his face. "Yeah, I did." A silence settled between them again, but this one felt different. Not cold, just honest. "Have you changed?" she asked quietly, unsure why the question mattered so much. "I hope so," he replied, voice just above a whisper. "Losing you made me grow up. Took longer than it should have, but here I am." Amara's heart twisted. She wanted to be angry, to remind him of every late night she waited for a call that never came. But the truth was, somewhere deep inside her, the part of her that believed in soul connections and second chances, still hoped, still loved. She looked at him carefully, this man who had once held her heart like it was both a miracle and a mistake. "Maybe the universe brought you back for a reason," she said, surprising even herself. He smiled softly. "I was hoping you'd say that." The coffee shop buzzed around them, but they remained in their quiet bubble. For the first time in years, Amara allowed herself to look at Liam not as a ghost from her past, but as a possibility for her future. And just like that, the rain began to fall outside, softly, like the sky was forgiving something too. The following days passed like petals unfolding after a storm, delicate, unsure yet undeniably hopeful. Amara hadn't expected to see Liam again, especially not after all these years, and certainly not sitting across from her at her favorite cafe like no time had passed. Yet here he was, an old wound reopened and stitched again with hesitant words and half smiles. Amara's world had always been quiet. She lived in a modest second-floor apartment above a bookstore that smelled of aged paper and lavender sachets. Every corner of her space whispered her personality canvases leaned against walls. Half-finished sketches littered the floor, and potted plants thrived in the slivers of sun that peeked through the windows each morning. Her world was calm, textured, intentional. Her best friend, Miri, often teased that Amara lived like a protagonist in a storybook, and maybe she did. But Amara had worked hard for that piece. She had built it piece by piece after Liam left, filling in the gaps of his absence with brushes, color, and quietness. But now he was back, and she could feel her carefully arranged world shift. The ground beneath her emotional footing rumbling. Liam, on the other hand, was all contrast. He was now a data strategist, sharp-minded and driven, yet still carried the faint scent of the dreamer he once was. The boy who once wrote poems in margins of library books was now a man who calculated risks for a living. But Amara could still see glimpses of who he'd been when he spoke with his hands, or laughed too hard at her. Dry jokes. They began to meet again, first under the safety of public places. Coffee shops, bookstores, weekend farmers markets where Amara would pretend not to notice. Liam watching her as she smelled peaches or cradled tomatoes like they were small planets. At first, their conversations were safe weather, work, mutual friends whose lives had splintered in other directions. But soon, their words began to stretch, reaching toward the heavy things, regrets, hurts, dreams deferred. One evening, as they sat on a bench overlooking the harbor, her favorite thinking spot, Liam finally asked, "Why didn't you move on?" Amara traced the grain of the wooden bench with her fingertip. "Who says I didn't? I mean, love again, date seriously?" She let the ocean wind fill the space between them before answering. "I tried, but no one ever made me feel the way you did. It wasn't about romance. It was how you made me believe in everything, my art, myself, life. You left, and I couldn't find that again." Liam closed his eyes like her words physically struck him. "I was so selfish," he said. "I thought leaving would protect you, that you'd be better off without me. You didn't give me the chance to decide," she said, voice barely above a whisper. They sat in silence, only the sound of water lapping against stone filling the air, still despite all that had passed. Amara began to notice something impossible happening inside her. She was starting to laugh again. A real laugh. The kind that curled into her chest and warmed her from the inside out. Liam somehow still knew how to find those small, hidden parts of her and coax them into the light. And Liam, for all his remorse and emotional baggage, was no longer the restless boy she once knew. He took his time now. He listened more. He asked questions. He apologized, not just with words, but with actions. He showed up. He carried her groceries. He waited for her after gallery shifts. He asked to see her paintings, even the ones she swore weren't ready. And he didn't leave, not this time. Their lives began to entangle again slowly, like vines climbing the same wall from different directions. Amara brought color to his world again. Liam brought motion back into hers. New Haven itself became a character in their journey. The old brick sidewalks, her apartment above the bookstore, the antique record store they rediscovered, the tiny art co-op where she'd been teaching for the last year. Each place now held new echoes of their reconnected story. They laughed over greasy takeout on her studio floor. He watched her paint, transfixed. She listened as he talked about his fear of never being enough. "You always were," she whispered once, not realizing she'd said it aloud. They were rewriting something, not erasing the past, but painting over it with new strokes. Softer, fuller. Still, not everything was seamless. There were moments when Amara would pull away, not physically, but emotionally. Her eyes would glaze when he spoke about his job in Seattle, or when he mentioned his 2-year plan. She didn't ask where he stayed now, or if he was thinking of going back. And Liam, sensing her hesitation, never pushed. They existed in a liminal space between what they had and what could be. But every time Liam looked at her, really looked, it felt like a plea. Let me try again. Let me stay. Let me be different. Amara didn't say yes. But she didn't say no either. The world around them kept turning days, folding into one another, past and present dancing delicately around the edges. And somewhere in between the familiarity and the fear, something new began to bloom. Not a redo, not a replacement, but a rebirth. It was never just the way Liam looked at her, it was the way he saw her. Amara hadn't expected to feel it again, that invisible thread between them, pulling tighter with every shared glance, every unfinished sentence that didn't need finishing. And yet, as the weeks turned into months, something intimate and unspoken began stitching itself between their moments. They weren't together, not officially, but they were undeniably becoming something. On a crisp Saturday morning, Liam showed up at the art co-op with a bag of her favorite pastries, apricot danishes from the old corner bakery. She was running a children's watercolor class, smudges of paint on her cheek and her hair tied in a messy bun. He watched her quietly from the back of the room, smiling at how easily she laughed with the kids, how her fingers danced across the canvas as she helped them blend their skies into soft purples and gentle blues. When the class ended, she turned and found him standing there, coffee in hand, looking at her like she was a whole galaxy. "You came," she said, surprised. "I said I would," he replied. "I miss watching you do what you love." They spent the afternoon walking through the historic district of New Haven, their fingers grazing occasionally, never quite holding hands, but never quite apart either. Conversation flowed easily now, no longer tiptoeing around the past, but rather weaving the old into the new, piece by honest piece. That evening, Amara took him to her favorite overlook, where the city stretched out like a glittering sea beneath them. The sun dipped low, washing the skyline in gold and amber. They sat on a worn wooden bench, shoulder to shoulder, silence settling between them like a comforting blanket. "Do you remember this place?" she asked. Liam looked out at the view and nodded. "This is where I first told you I loved you. The second month we were dating." Amara smiled softly. "You were so nervous, you stuttered through it." "I was terrified," he said, chuckling. "And you just said, 'finally'?" She laughed, the memory washing over her like sunlight. "I was waiting for weeks." Liam turned to her, his voice lower now, full of meaning. "I never stopped, loving you." Amara didn't look at him right away, her hands curled around the bench. "You left, I know," he said, his voice cracking. "And it's the biggest regret of my life." Her silence wasn't cold, it was heavy, careful. "I was scared," he continued, "of failing, of dragging you down with me. I thought love wasn't enough to make it all okay, but now I know. Nothing was okay without you." Amara finally looked at him. Her eyes shimmered, not just from the city lights. "Do you think people get second chances, Liam?" He held her gaze. "Only if they fight for them." That night, as they stood outside her apartment, the distance between them collapsed. He brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, soft, tentative. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, voice trembling. She didn't answer with words. She leaned in, and their lips met not in a fiery, passionate rush, but in something slower, something sacred. A remembering. A promise. It was the kind of kiss that rewrote endings. After that, their days grew more entangled. Liam started showing up at the art co-op with coffee. Amara found herself waiting for his texts at night, rereading them with a softness she hadn't felt in years. He invited her to walk with him in the evenings, and sometimes they cooked together, filling her tiny kitchen with laughter and the aroma of garlic and roasted herbs. But it wasn't all perfect. One night, she found an envelope. On her table, an offer letter. Liam had been asked to return to Seattle. It was a better position, more money, prestige, the kind of job he once thought would make everything in his life make sense. She stood there, reading the letter, feeling her stomach drop when he walked. And the air between them froze. "I was going to tell you," he said quietly. "Were you going to take it?" "I don't know," he said honestly. Tears welled in her eyes. "Don't you see, Liam? This asset only works if you choose it. You can't have both feet in two different cities anymore. I need to know you're here, really here." He stepped toward her. "Amara, I came back because I realized something was missing. It wasn't the job. It wasn't the city. It was you." "Then stay," she whispered. "I will," he said, his voice trembling. "But not just in this town. I want to stay in your life." That night, he didn't kiss her. He just held her arms around her on the studio floor, surrounded by her paintings and his promises. And somehow it felt more intimate than anything they'd shared before, because for the first time, Liam wasn't running Dot, and for the first time, Amara was choosing not to guard her heart. They were falling again, not recklessly, but with open eyes. With tenderness. With truth. Dot, and in every moment, every touch, every glance, every quiet morning, they were becoming what they should have been all along. Each other's safe place for a while. Everything felt almost perfect. Amara and Liam had built something tender, cautious, but real. Their connection had deepened with every passing day, marked by soft touches and long, meandering conversations where they rediscovered parts of each other left buried years ago. But perfection, Amara knew, was never meant to last, not when the past hadn't fully been faced. Dot, it started subtly. A missed call here, a delayed reply there. Liam grew quiet some nights, drifting into thought mid-conversation. He'd stare at his phone longer than usual, his fingers hesitating before locking the screen. Amara noticed, but she didn't say anything at first. Then came the evening, when she walked into her art studio and found Liam pacing near her easel. His phone was pressed to his ear, but when he saw her, he ended the call quickly, too quickly. She tilted her head. "Everything okay?" He nodded, but his eyes didn't meet hers. "Just work stuff?" His answer felt rehearsed. Later that night, she found him sitting outside on the porch swing, staring into the darkness. The autumn breeze made him look small somehow, hunched in his hoodie, distant. Amara sat beside him. "You've been somewhere else lately?" He looked at her, conflicted. "There's something I haven't told you." A tightness bloomed in her chest. "What is it?" "The Seattle job offer." He hesitated. "They called again, asked if I'd reconsider. Offered me double what I make now. A lead creative role. My dream title." Her heart twisted. "And?" "I told them no. At first." He ran a hand through his hair. "But the truth is, I've been thinking about it again." The air around them felt like it cracked. "After everything?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "I love being here with you, Amara, but I can't pretend I don't miss that part of myself, the ambitious, driven guy I used to be. I feel like I'm walking in your world now, not mine." Her words came out sharper than she intended. "So you feel like being with me holds you back?" "No," he said quickly. He exhaled heavily. "I don't know who I am anymore. I'm trying to be the man you need, but sometimes I wonder if I'm enough." Amara stood slowly, crossing her arms against the chill. "Do you even want this, US?" "Of course I do." Then why does it feel like you're already halfway gone? Silence stretched between them. She swallowed hard, the pain sharp in her chest. I can't do this again, Liam. I can't fall in love just to watch you walk away. He looked up at her, pain in his eyes. I'm not walking away. You're hesitating. That's almost worse. She turned and walked inside, leaving him on the porch, his hands clenched, his heart aching. Over the next few days, things shifted. They still talked, still met for lunch or coffee, but the easiness was gone. There was a tension, unspoken but heavy. Like a glass between them, neither dared to break. One evening, Amara ran into Eli, her childhood friend who had once been something more. They hadn't spoken in over a year, but when he saw her in the bookstore, he lit up with a warmth that made her feel seen. They talked for over an hour, laughing easily, slipping into old rhythms. He asked how she was doing, and without thinking, she admitted she wasn't sure. Eli's expression softened. If someone's making you question your worth, maybe they're not worthy of you. Amara didn't answer, but the words echoed in her that night. When she told Liam she'd run into Eli, she didn't expect the flare of jealousy in his eyes. Did you see him intentionally? Liam asked. Of course not. Are you sure you're not just keeping options open? She stared at him in disbelief. That's rich, coming from you. You're the one fantasizing about Seattle again. He stood, the air turning colder. I'm trying to figure out what's right for my future. That's not the same. But you're making me feel like I'm a temporary stop on your way to something better. Liam's voice cracked. You're not. You're the only thing that's ever felt like home. She took a deep breath, eyes shimmering. Then prove it. Choose me. Not because it's easy. Because it's real. He didn't reply, and in that silence, something inside her broke. The days that followed were marked by silence heavy and lingering. Amara poured herself into her art, painting until her fingers ached and the smell of oils and turpentine clung to her skin. But even the colors felt muted now. Her brushstrokes were slower, more uncertain, as if her heart no longer trusted what it was creating. She didn't hear from Liam for 3 days. Not a text, not a call. Not even a glimpse of him in town. At first, she told herself space was good, that maybe it was what they both needed. But by the 4th day, she found herself staring at her phone more often than she cared to admit. The absence left a hollowness inside her that no brushstroke could fill. And then, just as she was locking up her studio on a rainy Friday evening, she saw him. Liam, soaked from the rain, standing outside her door with his hands in his pockets, and his eyes carrying more sorrow than she'd ever seen. I didn't know where else to go, he said quietly. She stared at him for a long moment before stepping aside. Inside, the silence between them was deafening until Liam finally spoke. I went to the lake, he said, voice low. The one we used to ride our bikes to when we were kids. She looked at him, surprised. Why? I needed to remember. Something who I was back then. Before I thought success meant leaving everything behind. He exhaled shakily, running a hand through his wet hair. I kept thinking about what you said, about choosing. And you were right. I've always been torn between chasing the next big thing and holding on to what really matters. And I think, his voice cracked, I think I've been afraid to admit that I don't know how to love someone without ruining it. Amara's heart ached at the vulnerability in his words. Why? She asked softly. He swallowed. Because when I love, I get consumed. And when I get consumed, I run before someone else can leave first. Her voice trembled. But I never left, Liam. I was always here. I know. He stepped closer, eyes glassy. And that terrifies me more than anything. Because losing you would break me in a way I'm not sure I could come back from. Tears welled in her eyes, but she held them back. Then don't lose. Me. He nodded slowly, stepping even closer. I'm done running. I turned down Seattle for good. I told them no yesterday. Amara blinked. You did. He nodded, because I realized I'd rather build something imperfect with you than chase a perfect life without you. For a moment, all she could do was look at him. This wasn't the Liam who had walked away before. This was a man who had stood in the wreckage of his own fear and chosen differently. She stepped toward him, slowly, cautiously. You hurt me, Liam, and I still carry that. I know, he whispered, and I'll spend as long as it takes to earn your trust again. Her lip trembled. Do you love me? He didn't hesitate. With everything I have. And for the first time, I'm not afraid to say it. She let out a shaky breath, and for the first time in days, her heart exhaled too. He reached out gently, cupping her face like she was something sacred. Let me stay. Let me prove that I'm not that man anymore. Amara looked up at him, searching his eyes for the truth and finding it there. You can stay, she whispered, voice thick with emotion, but not as someone who might leave. Only as someone who chooses to stay every single day. I do, he whispered back, and kissed her with a tenderness that broke something wide open inside both of them. Liam didn't just say he was staying, he proved it day by day. In the quiet and the ordinary dot, it wasn't the grand gestures that began to mend the broken spaces between them. It was the little things. The way he waited outside Amara's studio with a cup of her favorite lavender tea after her late sessions. The way he fixed the creaky step on her porch without saying a word. The way he showed up again and again, not just physically, but emotionally, fully present. Dot. At first, Amara didn't know how to let herself trust again. She wanted to believe him. Wanted to fall into the warmth of his arms and forget everything that had once fractured them. But scars don't disappear overnight. They needed time. And Liam, for once, was willing to wait and not trying to erase the past. He told her one evening as they sat on her porch, wrapped in a shared blanket while the stars blinked above them. I just want to write a new chapter with you. And slowly, that's exactly what they did. They started going on quiet walks again, like they used to before everything became complicated. Not every conversation was profound. Sometimes they just talked about the sky or the weather or the old oak tree down the street. But somehow, those simple moments meant everything. Amara began to notice how different Liam was now, not changed entirely, but softened, grounded. There was a stillness in him that hadn't been there before, as though choosing to stay had anchored him in a way success never could. One afternoon, while they were sorting old boxes in her attic, Amara found a sketch she had drawn of him years ago, back when he'd first left town. She'd never shown it to him. In it, his eyes were full of longing, not unlike the ones he had now. She held it out to him, watching as his expression shifted. You kept this? He asked, his voice a mix of awe and disbelief. I drew it the week you left. I didn't even realize I still had it. Liam stared at the sketch, then looked at her. Even when I wasn't here, I lived in your heart. Her throat tightened. I tried not to let you, but some people, they stay even when you don't want them to. He folded the sketch gently and set it aside. Then maybe now I'll stay the way I should have all along. Their closeness grew again, but with new depth. They talked more openly now about their fears, their dreams, their regrets. Amara told him how abandoned she'd felt the first time he left. And again, when he considered doing it a second time, Liam didn't defend himself. He didn't make excuses. He listened, and then he apologized, not just with words, but with quiet devotion. You don't need to fix me, Amara said one day as they walked along the lake trail where they'd once biked as kids. I never needed that from you. I just needed you to choose me. I do, he said simply, every day, even on the hard ones. Especially on the hard ones. They started painting the spare room in her house together, something neither of them was particularly good at. The walls were patchy, and they kept laughing at each other's sloppy work. But by the end of the day, it felt like they'd created something imperfectly beautiful just like them. Sometimes healing looked like dancing, barefoot in the kitchen to old songs. Sometimes it looked like crying in the middle of a movie because the storyline hit too close to home. Sometimes it was just sitting in silence and holding hands, knowing that love didn't always need words to be real. One evening, as they watched the sunset from her studio window, Liam turned to her, eyes soft. I used to think love had to be earned through accomplishments. That if I wasn't doing something extraordinary, I wasn't worthy of being loved. Amara looked at him, heart aching. And now I know. Real love shows up. It listens. It stays. He reached for her hand. And you taught me. She leaned, her head on his shoulder, the warmth of his presence steady. We taught each other. There were still moments of doubt, echoes from the past that crept in late at night. But they were learning how to face them together, not as two people with unfinished wounds, but as two hearts willing to be stitched together again, one gentle moment at a time. It was the day of the town's annual art walk, a quiet, beloved tradition in the community where local artists open their studios to the public. Amara had participated every year since she moved back, but this year was different. This time, Liam would be there. Not just as someone stopping by, not just as someone standing on the sidelines, but as someone with her. He helped her set up early in the morning, carefully arranging her paintings and prints, stringing fairy lights around the windows and setting out cookies and cider for visitors. She caught him watching her more than once, not in the way he used to, with longing from afar, but with something fuller now. Something real, present. You're nervous, he said softly as he handed her a clean cloth to wipe a frame. She smiled with a small nod. Yeah, I guess part of me still wonders if people will see past the old rumors, past what they thought they knew about us. He brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. Let them see whatever they want. We know the truth. That's enough. And for once, it really was. As the day unfolded, people came in waves, friends from the past, new neighbors, curious visitors. They admired her art, asked questions, complimented the peaceful feel of the studio, but it was the final piece she unveiled, just before sundown, that left everyone silent. It was a painting of a lake sunset reflected on still water, and in the distance, two silhouettes holding hands at the water's edge. The title was simple. He stayed. A hush settled in the room, followed by quiet murmurs. Some smiled. A few blinked away tears. Liam stood beside her, his hand gently brushing hers, and he leaned down to whisper, "Is that us?" She smiled without turning. It always was. Later that night, after the last visitor had left and the lights were dimmed, they sat together in the glow of her studio. The hum of the world faded around them, and only the sound of their breathing remained. Liam said softly, if someone had told me a year ago that I'd find my way back to you, I wouldn't have believed them. And if someone told me I'd open my heart again to the man who broke it, Amara replied, I would have thought they were crazy, but here we are. Yeah, she said, turning to face him. Here we are. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small, a silver key on a delicate chain. Her eyes widened. I don't want to rush you, he said, voice low. But if there's even a part of you that can see us building something again, something lasting, I want you to have this. No pressure, just possibility. She looked down at the key in her palm, then back up at him. I'm not afraid of the future anymore, she said. Not with you. He smiled, eyes full of warmth. Then let's write it together. They stood, wrapped in each other's arms, not needing anything else. No perfect words. No grand promises, just this moment, soft, sure, and full of grace. And so the girl who was once shattered by love found strength not just in forgiveness, but in rediscovery. And the boy who once ran from his heart finally learned the courage to stay together They rebuilt something not perfect, but honest anchored. In trust, healed by time and sustained by love that chose to remain.